asking her former top aide. And in my take at 10, you won't want to miss this. Prince Harry's new Netflix documentary has dropped. I've watched it, so you don't have to. My verdict at 10. Don't miss it. It's great to be back. I've missed you massively. 2 hours of big opinion, big debate and big entertainment. It's Friday night, the weekend starts here, and let's kick off with the headlines. A good friend of mine, Lisa Hartle.
I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB newsroom. More schools may be forced to close due to a particular kind of concrete that's prone to sudden collapse. Abbey Lane Primary in Sheffield is one of over 150 in England at risk. Others in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are also being assessed. A TikTok influencer and her mother have been jailed for life for murdering two men. Mahik and Ansreen Bukhari ambushed the pair and killed them during a high-speed car chase near Leicester in February last year. Sadiq Hussain, who was travelling with Mohammed Hashim-e Jazuddin, had threatened to reveal an affair he'd had with the social media star's mother. The women will serve a medium term of more than 31 years and 26 years, respectively. Janine McKinney, Chief Crown Prosecutor, spoke after the trial.
Throughout the investigation and trial, we have seen continued lies and deceit from the defendants as they tried to evade responsibility for the killings. They showed complete disdain for the lives of their victims, and they showed little remorse for their actions. The families of the two young men who so tragically lost their lives at the hands of these defendants have patiently endured a lengthy and complex legal process as we brought these defendants to justice.
The number of migrants per boat crossing the Channel has hit a new monthly high. More than 5,000 people made the journey in August in 102 boats. That's an average of 53 people per vessel. The overall number of crossings is around 20% less than the same time last year. Another wave of rail strikes has hit services across the country. Members of the ASLEF union are staging a 24-hour walkout, leaving many trains without drivers. The rail delivery group describes the action as unnecessary, but the union says the government is refusing to make a reasonable pay offer. And passengers will face continued disruption tomorrow as the RMT union will walk out over pay and conditions. The disputes, which started over a year ago, remains at a deadlock. Two former leaders of far-right group Proud Boys have been jailed on charges relating to the storming of the US Capitol building in Washington. Joseph Biggs and Zachary Rell were convicted of seditious conspiracy for trying to overturn Donald Trump's 2020 election defeat. Their prison terms of 15 and 17 years are below US sentencing guidelines and far lower than the 30-year terms sought by federal prosecutors. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Mark.
Thanks, Lisa. We'll see you in an hour. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. It is fantastic to be back. I've really missed you, and my deepest thanks to the brilliant Patrick Christys and Leo Kearse for doing a fantastic job in my absence. Well, we've got a big autumn and winter planned for the show, and I cannot wait to get cracking. Tonight, in my big opinion, ULEZ, net zero policies, COVID tyranny, sky-high taxes. The state is now too dominant in our lives. They've forgotten that they work for us. Whatever happened to people power? In the big story, would Margaret Thatcher have stopped the boats? We'll be asking her former top aide. My Mark Meets guest is the man who beat cancer and went on to win the Grand National. Horse racing icon Bob Champion. Bob tells his incredible, inspiring story shortly. And in my take at 10, Prince Harry's new Netflix documentary has dropped. I've watched it, so you don't have to. My official verdict at 10. You won't want to miss it. Plus, will you get boosted to save the NHS? I'll be asking tonight's Newsmaker, the former BBC presenter Sue Cook. We've got tomorrow's front pages at 10:30 with reaction from three top pundits who haven't been told what to say and who do not follow the script. Tonight, Emma Wolfe, David Oldroyd-Bolt and Mike Porky Parry. Tonight I'll be asking the pundits, is celibacy underrated? Would you pay more for a child-free flight? And as French President Emmanuel Macron slaps a new tax on Brits' holiday homes, is it time for a war with France? Come on, we'd win it! Plus, the most important part of the show, your emails. They come straight to my laptop, mark@gbnews.com. And this show has a golden rule, a strict rule. This is my red line, folks. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. It's great to be back. I have missed you. A big 2 hours to come. Let's start with my big opinion. Remember that old thing, democracy, and the people deciding what happens? Ah, those were the days when the government served the will of the people and lived in fear of our judgment every 5 years as we went to the polls. But the will of the people is now nothing more than a minor inconvenience to those who govern us. Take the rollout of the clean air scheme ULEZ at the hands of London's despotic Mayor Sadiq Khan. A policy, the evidence for which is thinner than posh spice on the keto diet. This hasn't stopped the leadership at City Hall inflicting a wildly unpopular policy based upon the fantasy that somehow thousands of lives will be saved, and a policy, of course, which will impact those on the lowest incomes. Apparently, this is all about the environment. People have got to get rid of their perfectly functional cars and upgrade them to new eco-friendly cars, which involve vast amounts of energy and resource to produce. So a workhorse 10-year-old Volkswagen Passat that exists must make way for a Tesla or Nissan Leaf that in some cases hasn't even been built yet. All of this to save the planet. How is throwing away old cars that work good for the environment? Make it make sense. Now, this clean air scheme has come to national attention, partly because Labour's very own ginger growler, Angela Rayner, has admitted this policy will be rolled out across all our major cities, and because it's another example of the war on people power, which reached its nadir during the pandemic, when the public were told who to see, who not to see, when to go shopping and where, when to work, when not to work, and so on. We should have been allowed to make a judgment about the risks of the virus for ourselves and our families and act accordingly, as was the case in Sweden and the US states of Florida and Texas, where, surprise, surprise, they had excellent COVID outcomes. No lockdown, no mask mandate. Sweden boasts the lowest excess pandemic deaths in Europe. People power in action. The authoritarianism we saw in the UK during the pandemic, for our own good apparently, was a test case for the future, the shape of things to come, with the state telling you what's best for you and how to live and behave. And the woke takeover of our public institutions is starting to tell you what to think and say as well. And COVID tyranny, in which people were masked, locked down, and in many cases jabbed against their will, has been replaced by a brand new political variant: climate change. Now, I'm all for getting emissions down and cleaning up the planet, and I'm worried about rising temperatures and freak weather incidents. A climate change denier I am not. We must act. But the arbitrary push for net zero, which looks to be making all the same mistakes as COVID, by ignoring the economy, open debate and evidence-based science, is another example of the war on people power, with the state and corporations via a compliant media telling you how and when to heat your home, which car to drive, and perhaps in time, how many flights you can take, how many cups of tea you can have in a day, and how much meat you can have on your dinner plate. We now have a political and media class detached from the concerns of millions of Brits, which ultimately poses a threat to our democracy and plays into the hands of bonkers extremists who will happily seek to fill the void. It's time for politicians to understand that they work for us, not the other way round, and we pay their wages. Since the pandemic, it feels like the roles have reversed, with us serving them and obeying their will. And it seems to me that Labour and the Conservatives are two cheeks of the same arse. Whether it's concerns about the cost of net zero, the real-world impact of policies like ULEZ, or worries about illegal immigration into the country, if people don't feel listened to and heard, and if policies are not rolled out with the public's support, engagement and consent, it doesn't end well. Disaffected voices grow louder, public anger rises, and bad actors take advantage. If they're not careful, the peasants will revolt. A revolting outcome for all concerned. There we are. I dashed across that studio like a gazelle. Because I tried to get fit while I was on holiday, but it didn't work, did it? What do you think? Mark at GBNews.com. Now, let me be clear that the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is very, very focused on cleaning up the air in the capital. He's concerned about the impacts on the health of Londoners from toxic fumes from cars, and therefore he thinks that this is the first step into making London a healthier and safer place to be. It's also worth noting that there are plenty of Londoners who support ULEZ as well. And let me do a word on the lockdowns. The government are very clear, as well as most mainstream scientists in the West, that the lockdowns, the vaccine mandates and the mask mandates saved countless lives. It's all about opinions. What's yours? Mark at gbnews.com. First up, let's hear from tonight's top pundits, author and journalist Emma Wolfe, historian and writer David Oldroyd-Bolt, and TV and radio broadcaster Fleet Street legend Mike Porky Parry. David, welcome back to the show. You're looking spiffy.
Thank you, my dear.
Whatever happened to people power?
I think you've made a fundamental error in your analysis. We don't live in a direct democracy. We live in a representative democracy. As Edmund Burke said to the electors of Bristol in the 1780s, you elect your MP to go to Parliament in order to exercise his or her judgment as best they conceive on your behalf. We don't elect them to go there and do what you say.
The doctor's mandate, that's how it was referred to, wasn't it?
Exactly.
The idea that in the end the doctor will make the judgment, the doctor being a metaphor for an MP.
Yeah, exactly so. And
that's why hanging was never reintroduced, isn't it?
Well, exactly, because the point is that those 60% of the public, from time to time, 50, 60% of the public thinks that hanging is worthwhile. Those whom we seek to have as represented in Parliament do not. But the point about legislation is that it should always be taken on the broadest possible view. And that does not mean that you have hobby horses. Now, in broad sense, I agree with your philosophical bent on the mandate, and I agree with you about ULEZ. But I think we're in great danger since the referendum, which I supported because that was a matter of national interest. That was a matter of such great import that it could only be dealt with by plebiscite. But in general, I believe that the reason we elect MPs is to exercise judgment, it is to exercise intelligence, and it is to take the broadest possible view. And I don't think, as a consequence, that what you're saying, that people aren't being represented, that their voices are not being heard, is true. I think if you want your voice to be heard, you have two options. One is that you write to your elected representative, you make your voice heard. And the other is that you take part yourself. You become a local councillor, you become a parish councillor, you stand for election, you join a political party. And as a consequence, you make your voice the one that is heard more broadly.
However, Emma Wolfe, many of my viewers and listeners do not feel that they voted for net zero. Many Londoners do not feel they voted for ULEZ.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this. Does the government interfere more now in our lives than it used to? We were always told, you know, eat your 5 a day, don't smoke, say no to drugs, stay away from strangers, don't wear short skirts, wear a helmet, wear a seatbelt. All this nonsense. They've been throwing that at us for decades.
Most of that was advice,
you know
wasn't
what?
it?
It was, well, yeah, but they've been interfering in our lives for decades. They have. And way before that. Go to war, go and kill yourself, go and do this. But something in, and you bring up the pandemic, something in the last 3, 4, 5 years has changed. And I think lockdown for me and for many, many people just broke us. I will never trust the government, or certainly not this generation of government that they've been knocking around for a good 5 years now. I will never trust them again. The stupidity, the lies that have been exposed over lockdown, over COVID, the whole... And the ULEZ, if you look at the statistics, there's plenty of evidence that there's been shady dealing between Sadiq Khan's office and
Imperial.
you know, the massaging of statistics. How effective is ULEZ?
Of course, they would deny those comments, but you're entitled to your view. I mean, there is a view that
I want clean air too. I cycle around London with a toddler on the back. If I don't want clean air, I don't know who does. But I think this is going to work, and do I think that throwing out perfectly usable 10-year-old cars that are functioning on the road is a good idea? No.
Indeed, it begs the question, how would they dispose of these cars, and is that good for the environment? Make it make sense. Mike Parry, make it make sense.
Well, you know, David and Emma have made some very good points. David in particular says, and gives us the role of MPs in life. But you're talking about rational people. We're talking, when we look at Sadiq Khan, about a nasty, manipulative, scheming individual who's determined to reshape society in his own image.
Speaks well of you, you know.
Right. I read a piece this week that he's a member of a worldwide group of 40 mayors who have such a left-wing agenda in the future, like, for instance, restricting people to 1 flight a year, OK, to try and introduce alcohol controls so you can be turned down on the amount of drink you want when you go in a pub. I mean, you haven't hit half.
But that already exists.
No, it doesn't.
To be fair,
it does. The landlord has the absolute right under licence to refuse you service.
Of course he does.
Believes you've had too much.
When he makes the judgment, you're intoxicated.
And if anyone knows that, it's Mike Parry.
But I don't get intoxicated on 2.5 drinks, and they're going to restrict you to 2.5 drinks. They're going to try and control your life.
OK.
Well, I don't. Mark, you didn't get to the 20-mile-an-hour zones that we've now got in the world. You didn't get to the fact that in the future motorways will be restricted to 50 miles an hour. That's another part of their plan.
Well, this is exactly...
They're trying to control our lives.
This is what we need to debate, and that's the essence of my big opinion, whatever happened to people power. I think that the government, whether it's at London level or across the UK, has become more authoritarian. You can do net zero, but you've got to take the public with you. It's got to be done through democratic means. What do you think? Mark at gbnews.com. Let me say there's no evidence. I don't have access to evidence of what Mike said about Mayor Khan's big plan, his connections with other mayors, but it's all about opinions. What's yours? Mark at gbnews.com. Next up in the big story, would Margaret Thatcher have stopped the boats? We'll be asking her former top aide. See you in 2.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to. by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. The emails are coming in thick and fast. Big reaction to my big opinion with ULEZ, with net zero, with COVID tyranny. Whatever happened to people power? I think the government have forgotten that we pay their wages. Mark at GBnews.com. Richard says, Mark, COVID illustrated how easy it is to manipulate the peasants. The end game is a managed decline into a controlled digital universal income. The majority will embrace it, endorse it and enjoy it. Look how many people loved lockdown. John says, hi, Mark, don't be concerned about rising temperatures or extreme weather. There is no real scientific evidence that weather is becoming more extreme. It's just reported more widely. John says, Mark, my brother's carer can now not come to see him because he can't afford to pay £12.50 daily, and it has fallen on the NHS and the council to give him social care. Sheila, in response to my comments about Sweden, says, Mark, Sweden only has 10 million people and a less densely distributed population than the UK. Obviously, they were going to be less affected by COVID than we were. Think about it. Sheila, thank you for that. Switzerland allows people power, says Ian, via referendums at every level, from local to national. This country, with no natural resources, is probably the richest in Europe. And Alison finally says, hi, Mark, glad to see you back. Your guest, David, said to contact our members of Parliament to voice our views. Big problem with that is they do not respond. So what is the point? Well, Alison, I respond. Mark at gbnews.com, that's the email. I'll get to more of your thoughts shortly, but it's time now for the big story. And with disillusionment growing around the government's failure to tackle illegal migrant crossings, Margaret Thatcher's former advisor, Niall Gardner, broke the internet this week with the following tweet saying that Margaret Thatcher would have stopped the boats. Quote, tweeting a fellow commentator who invoked the memory of Thatcher, Gardner wrote, the Iron Lady would definitely stop the boats today as Prime Minister. Not a single migrant boat would be landing on British soil on her watch. She is greatly missed. Well, I'm delighted to say that the former aide to Margaret Thatcher, broadcaster, writer and foreign policy analyst Niall Gardner joins me now. Niall, what makes you so sure Mrs T would have fixed this complex problem?
Well, Mark, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show today. And it's certainly my view that Lady Thatcher would have dealt highly effectively with the small boats crisis. She would not have allowed the vast number of migrants to cross the English Channel onto British soil. She would have stopped those boats. She would have used whatever power was necessary in order to do so, including, of course, the full might of the Royal Navy. And also, I'm sure that Lady Thatcher would have taken Britain out of the European Convention on Human Rights. ECHR is absolutely outrageous in terms of limiting British sovereignty, self-determination. And she would have, I think, stopped this migrant crisis completely in its tracks, and we would not be in the situation that we're facing today. There's far too much weakness. There's a lack of real will to deal with the situation. And a world power like Great Britain should be able to stop this kind of small boats invasion that we are witnessing. And Lady Thatcher would have emphatically, I think, dealt with this issue.
However, Niall, as you well know, probity was a key theme of Thatcher's premiership. She wouldn't have wanted to have broken international law, would she?
Well, I think that increasingly Lady Thatcher was of the view that European supranationalism posed a tremendous threat to British sovereignty and self-determination. In fact, in her last book, Statecraft, she outlined her vision for Britain's future role outside of the European Union. And I'm in no doubt that if she were Prime Minister today, she would be taking the UK outside of the ECHR. Of course, it's not an EU court, but it's a supranational court which includes all of the members of the European Union. Britain should not be part of a court that basically prevents the UK from deporting illegal migrants, stopping migrants from entering into the UK. She would have stood up for British sovereignty, for British freedom, for self-determination, and I'm in no doubt she would have stood up to the Eurocrats who are trying to still hold sway over British law today, even though the UK, of course, is outside of the European Union now. So we should not have supranational courts dictating a British immigration policy here. It's absolutely outrageous. She would have, I think, thrown the ECHR completely out.
Niall, you've written a fascinating article in The Telegraph this week about another snub for Britain by Joe Biden, this time in relation to the Prime Minister's flagship Artificial Intelligence Summit. What's happened?
Well, so Rishi Sunak unveiled in Washington earlier in the summer very ambitious plans for a large-scale artificial intelligence conference summit to be held in the UK at Bletchley Park in November. And this was the flagship announcement of his visit to the White House with Joe Biden. But Joe Biden has deliberately snubbed Britain by saying that he will not attend the AI conference, even though all the other leaders of the G7 are attending it. Even Emmanuel Macron is attending the AI summit. So it's a real snub from Joe Biden. It's a further reflection of the fact, I think, that Biden hates Britain. He's an extremely rude, arrogant president. And it's time for Rishi Sunak to stand up to Biden, stand up for Britain. I think there has been far too much weakness projected in the face of the left-wing Biden administration. We need to have a Prime Minister standing up to Biden, who does not treat Britain like a friend and ally. In fact, he knifed the candidacy of Ben Wallace to be the next Secretary General of the NATO alliance. He also, of course, sank the prospects for a US-UK trade deal. He made all sorts of threats against Britain over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Joe Biden is no friend of Britain, actually. And so the Prime Minister should stand up to Biden and stand up for the British national interest.
Niall Gardner, always a pleasure to have you on the show. If you get a chance, pop onto the Telegraph website and check out Niall's latest article. The pundits and Mark meets still to come, but first, here's your weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Showers clearing overnight, some low cloud remaining, even some fog by dawn, but the trend is for it to turn increasingly sunny and increasingly warm over the next few days as high pressure replaces low pressure. Low pressure already filling and disappearing overnight, and as a result, the showers and any outbreaks of rain tending to become very isolated through the hours of darkness. A lot of low cloud, I think, especially for England and Wales, and some fog patches forming by dawn. But the clearest skies will be across northern Scotland. Here, temperatures dipping close to freezing in some of the most sheltered spots, single figures widely. Further south, it's a mild night, and again, there'll be some low cloud and mist as we start things off. But that will, through the morning, lift and it will break up. Eventually, we'll see some sunny spells break through. I think still some cloud remaining, still some showers across England and Wales, but not as many as recent days. There'll be plenty of fine weather on offer and it will feel warmer. 26 Celsius there, the high in the southeast, low 20s widely elsewhere. And into Sunday, again, a bit of a slow start, some mist and fog first thing, especially for southern parts of the UK. Breezier further north with some outbreaks of rain for the north and northwest of Scotland. That tends to ease later in the day as sunshine develops widely across the country in time for the start of next week. And as that happens, temperatures rise.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Coming up with tonight's pundits, is celibacy underrated? You'll have to ask Mrs. Dolan. Would you pay more for a child-free flight? And as French President Emmanuel Macron slaps a new tax on Brits' holiday homes, is it time for a war with France? Plus, in an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll, we've been asking, would Margaret Thatcher have stopped the boats? The results are in, and I will reveal all next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan Tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Look, it's great to be back. I've missed you hugely. Lots of emails coming in that are very kind in terms of my return. Well, look, we've got a really busy autumn and winter planned. You will not want to miss a second. Let's have a look at your emails in response to my big opinion, mark@gbnews.com. And we will have a look at Peter, who says, Mark, MPs mostly respond to electors with paternalism. Let's pretend our voices are heard at ministerial level where decisions are made. Party policy rules, not the voters. Now, the key theme of my big opinion was whatever happened to people power. Also, this welcome back says, Richard, lovely to hear your opinions again. I do agree with you that there's no difference between either of the two main political parties now. However, I feel this is part of a plan. By allowing Labour to take over at the next election, the Conservatives can allow them to take us backwards into the EU. What a thought there. In regards to Joe Biden and Rishi Sunak and the special relationship, Phil says Sunak couldn't stand up to anyone, the weakest Prime Minister this country has ever had. The boats wouldn't have even started under Thatcher, says Richard, let alone the need to stop them. And last but not least for now, Yvonne has emailed. Sunak is weak and no leader. We need a strong PM, someone like Lee Anderson or Farage or Reform to sort this out. The government and Labour are failing There is no enthusiasm to stop the boats. We need balls, says Yvonne. Keep those emails coming, Mark, at gbnews.com. The result of tonight's Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll is in. We've been asking you, would Margaret Thatcher have stopped the boats? 88% say yes and 12% say no. Reacting to the big stories of the day, tonight's top pundits, author and journalist Emma Wolfe, historian and writer David Oldroyd-Bolt, and TV and radio legend Mike Porky Parry. Celibacy? Why? That's what one social media user asked an American Roman Catholic priest on the platform Reddit, answering questions about his life as a man of the cloth. Father Paul was bombarded with questions about sex. His response to why celibacy was that there is more to the world than sex and that ultimately leading a celibate lifestyle is rewarding. So should we all be thinking more carefully about leading a sex-free life? Is celibacy underrated? I've had my fair share. Mike Porky Parry, what do you think?
Well, you know, celibacy is a good idea at times because it makes life much less complicated, OK? Problem with me is I've been very popular with the opposite sex for most of my life. And no, I'm serious. And for instance, when I was working in Fleet Street, secretaries in particular used to throw themselves at me. And the thing is, a man has an image and you can't keep turning offers down, if you see what I mean. So you actually get involved. And my view has always been that the evening, the night, and then, you know, you go to bed and all that kind of stuff is great. It's the following morning, which is the big problem. Because the minute I wake up, I want to start working and getting on with things. And if there's somebody else around, it tends to be a distraction.
And she's looking for a second course, isn't she?
Well, I'm not sure it's a second course. She might even be looking for breakfast, but I haven't even got time for that. You know what I mean?
Mike, what attracted these ladies, all the secretaries and everything, to you? I guess you were a powerful man in Fleet Street. Well, power is an aphrodisiac, isn't it?
Power's an aphrodisiac, and I was running the Daily Express largely on a day-to-day basis. That made me, you know, quite tasty. But I was rather good-looking.
Would you have come unstuck
as a younger man?
Would you have come unstuck in the old Me Too era? Could you have had a case to answer?
Oh, no. I've always been highly respectful to women, and that's why sometimes I found it very difficult to have to turn them down. Now, the other thing is, as you're growing up, I'm talking now about my late 20s, going to 30s, you've got to keep an image up with your other male friends.
It's not the only thing you've got to keep up.
No. But you've got to keep an image up. So it's actually part of the image, particularly if you're, you know, the news editor and all that kind of stuff, is to have a pretty lady on your arm a lot of the time, right? Now, that is for show, really. But then when it means getting down to the business, there was all, you know, there can always be something else on your mind, if you see what I mean. You know, the job is very intense and all that kind of stuff, you know. So you have to be very careful with those with whom you choose to liaise.
Well, I think Mike raises some interesting points, because I've certainly noticed that when people get out of a relationship, they become single again, Emma, they become very productive and they pursue their career and they put themselves first.
I just love hearing from Mike about how unbelievably attractive he is to the opposite sex. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, do you know, I've not heard the word secretary in about 20 years.
I know, I love that too. Pretty lady on his arm, all of that.
No, I can only tell it as it was.
Mike, let's talk about that radio debate we did a few months ago, where he was telling me, he was referring to himself as utterly devastating to the opposite sex. He was a middle-aged man. He doesn't think that 60 or north of 60 is older. He's a middle-aged man in peak physical fitness. You said it. Yeah. I've got the documentary evidence.
OK.
He's in peak physical fitness. He cannot fight the women off. I love it. But I have to say, the Me Too thing, he's not... Porky is not a groper. You're not gropey. He's not inappropriate. He's not the kind, when you say hello in the green room, he doesn't
I've never
touch
had
your bottom.
Never had a single allegation.
He's always respectful. He shouts a lot at me, but he's lovely and respectful.
And that's why he's not going to get cancelled tonight for his colourful, old-school language. But what about celibacy?
Porky is not a groper. There you go. There's your headline.
That's your headline.
Thank you very much.
What about celibacy, though? I mean, is it worth...
I'm the mother of a 3-year-old. Don't talk to me about sex. I could talk about celibacy. You know, there are times in your life when sex is not kind of top priority, I suppose.
But people
You've
are
had
ashamed.
young- you've had young children.
David, is it something that should be celebrated rather than be embarrassed about?
Certainly in the role of the priesthood, yes. Because the point of celibacy in the priesthood is that the church is the bride of Christ.
Yeah. You're married to God.
You are married to the church as an institution, and that you give your life to your parishioners and to your vocation as a priest. And I think it is a great denial. I'm a Catholic, and I've talked a great deal to priests over the years about this. It is a huge denial of a part of life, but it amplifies so much more of life, and it makes sure that they can give themselves to their parishioners totally.
Well, it
that they
leads
can
to
be
huge
the
problems,
father.
doesn't it? Leads to huge problems
That's an
in the
enormous
Catholic
generalisation that is
I
not
don't
borne
think,
out by the...
I don't think it is, Dave. It's led to huge problems within the Catholic Church, celibacy. And in fact, a mate of mine...
You're putting it down to celibacy rather than the intrinsically sinful nature of man.
Well, sinful nature of man, certainly, but sometimes the sinful nature...
why the priesthood particularly
the
rather
sinful
than the general
nature of man can be watered down by a man indulging himself in his desires.
That doesn't...
And Catholic
I think what Mike's suggesting
but that
is
doesn't water down sin, that just gives it opportunity.
What Mike's suggesting is that celibacy is unnatural and it produces an evil...
Not evil, but a frustrating position for an individual human being to be in. A mate of mine, his brother was a Catholic priest who suddenly decided, I do have desires, I'm going to fulfil them, so he left the priesthood.
Yes, which is the right thing to do.
Left the priesthood, and his mother nearly committed suicide. You know, it was one of those situations.
Well,
you know what I mean?
It's an awful decision to make, but you're essentially saying that giving vent to sin waters down sin. That's not the case at all. You control sin by giving yourself to the church.
It's very hard to control sin.
Yes, it is. That's why it's a difficult thing to be a priest.
Is celibacy unnatural?
I don't think celibacy is unnatural. It's just a different form of living.
It is different. And the thing about sex is when you're having lots of sex, you think it's unbelievably important. And when you're celibate, it isn't important.
I think that's a fair point.
But also, people are ashamed to admit they're celibate, and I'm not. I have had periods of maybe a year or 18 months sometimes in which I've thought, I can't be bothered. The last relationship got too messy, I got in too deep. I can't have any of that again. And I just say, I have said to women who, again, throw themselves at me, I'm not interested, I'm sorry. You know, Gary Lineker is
littered with Mike Parry's victims.
If you are somebody that worked with Mike Parry in the 1980s, perhaps in a secretarial
Still undergoing
role,
therapy, maybe?
Perhaps you'd like to drop me a line. Tell me about your experience with the great man. Mark@gbnews.com. And if there's a photo of you in your pomp, I'm happy to put it on TV.
That's a bit harsh.
That's asking for trouble. Quick one, by the way. Emmanuel Macron slapping a massive tax on Brits with holiday homes in France. Is it time for a war with France? You're a historian. We'd win it, wouldn't we, if we went to war with France,
The
David?
balance of probability of the past 1,000 years is yes, we would.
So there you go. We've got the seal of approval. Who knew that war with France wouldn't be controversial, but celibacy would? Coming up in My Take at 10, Prince Harry's new Netflix documentary has arrived. I've watched it, so you don't have to. My official verdict at 10. You won't want to miss that. But first, my Mark Meets guest is the man who beat cancer and went on to win the Grand National. Horse racing icon Bob Champion tells his incredible story next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media.
We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, coming up in my Take at 10, Prince Harry's new documentary has arrived. I've watched it so you don't have to, but first, Mark Meets. And tonight, a British sporting icon, bob champion CBE, who was a highly successful jump jockey before being struck down by testicular cancer in July 1979. This hugely popular figure saw a nation pray for his recovery. It took time and was hard fought, but the theme of Bob's life is winning. Following his miraculous recovery from cancer, he bounced back in the best way possible, winning the 1981 Grand National on Aldenite. His incredible story became a film, Champions, a box office smash, with John Hurt playing the man himself. I'm told he asked for Clint Eastwood. And I'm delighted to say that Bob Champion joins me now. Bob, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. You were at the height of your powers as an athlete and at the top of your career as a jockey. Can you take me through your emotions when you received that cancer diagnosis?
Well, it was absolutely strange. Anyway, welcome back, Mark. You've been away for a few days. Nice to see you again.
Thank you, Bob.
Basically, I was a very fit jockey at the time, having my best season. And I always spent the summer in America to ride over there because there was no racing here, jumping. And I had this ache and pain. And so basically, I was lucky. I'll be honest. I started going out with a vet, a lady vet, mind you. And when I managed to get her into bed, the first thing she said to me was, if I was you, I'd get on the first plane back to England and see a specialist. Well, that put me off my stroke, I promise you. And got back to England. I rang a doctor up in Park Street Clinic in London who used to patch us jockeys up, Dr. Turner, and told him what was wrong, not having a clue what was wrong. And he said, ring me back in 20 minutes and I'll have an appointment for you. So rang him back, ended up going to the Royal Marsden, and then basically started the treatment. I had testicular cancer, but it had spread, and I'd left it a little bit too late, really. And so they gave me choices, actually. They gave me 2 choices. They had a new chemotherapy, which was very barbaric those days, or I said I didn't want anything. I would just carry on riding. With a bit of luck, I'd get killed on the racetrack. And they looked at me if I was stupid. Most likely I was. And said, well, basically, if you don't have any treatment, you'll be lucky to live 6 or 7 months. And with the treatment, we'll give you about a 30% chance of recovery. So thankfully, I had the treatment and recovered.
Did getting the disease and surviving it change you as a person, Bob?
Yes, it did, actually. it made me appreciate everything, I must admit, and take every day as it comes. And, you know, I was lucky. It was very, very hard to get fit again, I must admit, because the drugs had destroyed about 60% of my lung capacity. So being a jockey without good lungs isn't a very good thing. So I had to work really, really hard. And I think it helped me going back to America, not just going back there, because the weather was warm over there and I found it easier to train. And I think that got me back 2 or 3 months quicker than if I'd stayed in the cold weather here in England.
Did the survival of cancer make you braver, less fearful on a horse?
I think, well, firstly, I didn't want to die in the first place, but I think it might have made me braver. You know, I was a pretty decent jockey before I had the cancer, and I'm not saying I was as good when I came back. I was a couple of years older as well. It was so hard to get fit. That was the hardest bit. And, you know, basically I was getting by on knowing what to do, really, in the first few rides. And I got fitter as the season went on, I must admit. And, you know, thankfully, when the old horse came back, old and eaty, I was pretty fit then. And I can remember he came back into training on January the 1st, back to Josh's, because he'd broken down so badly at Sandown. The vets wanted to put him down, but I said one day he'd win a national one day, and the owners must have believed me. And so he was absolutely amazing. He was in plaster, tied up in a stable for 6 months, couldn't lie down, just eating out of his bowl and water there for 6 months. He would have sent me crazy. Then he went back to Josh's on January the 1st, 1981. February the 13th, he went to Ascot in the Whitbread trial, absolutely bolted up. And I can remember that morning seeing he was 66-1 for the national and 16-1 to win the Whitbread trial. As you know, jockeys aren't allowed to bet, but mothers were. She had a few quid on.
Let's talk about that Grand National win after your recovery. Did you have a good feeling on the day? How did the race itself feel as it was happening?
Well, I was always very confident the old horse would win, and I was ultra confident. And, you know, you got down to the start and you do all the work down there, check your girths, look where your horses you're going to track are, your dangers, and you line up, and the governor went down, and I can always remember the governor saying, you know, we've got here and everything. And I said, Governor, if I win, you can pack up smoking. And after I won, he gave up smoking. Absolutely brilliant. But the race went all right after I jumped the first two. He overjumped the first, nearly went. It wasn't great at the second. From that moment, he was a joy to ride, I must admit. My orders were hold him up until the last fence. I jumped to the front at Valentine's the first time, which is 3.5 miles from home. And all I could think of the next 3.5 miles was the rollicking I'm getting from the stands from the governor. But I knew I was in the right place. I was jumping for fun. And, you know, I came to the last in front. I thought I'm in the right place at the right time and went and won 3 lengths.
And the rest is history. Do you still ride horses, Bob?
No, I don't, actually. I haven't sat on one I did sit on one last year, just sat on one, but I'm a little bit heavy, actually. If I was a 2 stone lighter, I'd ride out every day because I'd be able to ride work. And I just don't fancy just riding around the roads or anything. I've done all that in the past. And, you know, riding work, if I was light enough, I would love to, I must admit.
Bob, a true privilege to have you on the show. You have surely raised more awareness in this country than anyone else about the horrible disease that is cancer. You set up the Bob Champion Cancer Trust, which is now 40 years old. So congratulations on that and an incredible career. And I hope we catch up again soon.
Thanks very much. Have a good evening.
The amazing bob champion CBE. I remember my mum and dad took the family to see Champions. What a film. OK, lots more to come. Full details of the next hour. But first, here's a quick weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Showers clearing overnight, some low cloud remaining, even some fog by dawn, but the trend is for it to turn increasingly sunny and increasingly warm over the next few days as high pressure replaces low pressure. Low pressure already filling and disappearing overnight, and as a result, the showers and any outbreaks of rain tending to become very isolated through the hours of darkness. A lot of low cloud, I think, especially for England and Wales, and some fog patches forming by dawn. But the clearest skies will be across northern Scotland. Here, temperatures dipping close to freezing in some of the most sheltered spots, single figures widely. Further south, it's a mild night, and again, there'll be some low cloud and mist as we start things off. But that will, through the morning, lift and it will break up. Eventually, we'll see some sunny spells break through. I think still some cloud remaining, still some showers across England and Wales, but not as many as recent days. There'll be plenty of fine weather on offer and it will feel warmer. 26 Celsius there, the high in the southeast, low 20s widely elsewhere. And into Sunday, again, a bit of a slow start, some mist and fog first thing, especially for southern parts of the UK. Breezier further north with some outbreaks of rain for the north and northwest of Scotland. That tends to ease later in the day as sunshine develops widely across the country in time for the start of next week. And as that happens, temperatures rise.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
We'll look a very busy hour to come. Hot off the press, we've got tomorrow's papers with live reaction from tonight's top pundits. And in my take at 10, you will not want to miss this. Prince Harry's new Netflix documentary has dropped. I've watched it, so you don't have to. 5 hours of my life that I won't get back. That's my official verdict in just a few minutes. So, what have you got to do? Well, get the kettle on. I'll see you shortly. The weekend starts here. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. I'm back with a vengeance.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock and it is great to be back. On television, on radio and online. In the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my Take a 10, Prince Harry's new Netflix documentary has arrived. I've watched it all 5 hours worth, so you don't have to. My official verdict in a couple of minutes. You won't want to miss it. Also, will you get boosted to save the NHS this winter? I'll be asking tonight's Newsmaker, former BBC presenter Sue Cook. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages, hot off the press, and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits. So, a packed show, lots to get through, but first the news with Lisa Hartle.
I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB newsroom. We start with some breaking news. Former Harrods and Fulham FC owner Mohammed Al Fayed has died at the age of 94. The Egyptian-born businessman was a self-made billionaire. His passing comes almost 26 years to the day after his son was killed alongside Princess Diana in a car crash in Paris. He continued to search for answers surrounding the death of his son, Dodi. More schools may be forced to close due to a particular kind of concrete that's prone to sudden collapse. Abbey Lane Primary in Sheffield is one of over 150 in England at risk. Others in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are also being assessed. A TikTok influencer and her mother have been jailed for life for murdering 2 men. Mehek and Ansreen Bukhari ambushed the pair and killed them during a high-speed car chase near Leicester in February last year. Sadiq Hussain, who was travelling with Mohammed Hashim Ijazuddin, had threatened to reveal an affair he'd had with the social media star's mother. The women will serve a minimum term of more than 31 years and 26 years, respectively. Janine McKinney, Chief Crown Prosecutor, spoke after the trial.
Throughout the investigation and trial, we have seen continued lies and deceit from the defendants as they tried to evade responsibility for the killings. They showed complete disdain for the lives of their victims, and they showed little remorse for their actions. The families of the 2 young men who so tragically lost their lives at the hands of these defendants have patiently endured a lengthy and complex legal process as we brought these defendants to justice.
The number of migrants per boat crossing the Channel has hit a new monthly high. More than 5,000 people made the journey in August in 102 boats. That's an average of 53 people per vessel. The overall number of crossings is around 20% less than the same time this time last year. Another wave of rail strikes has hit services across the country. Members of the ASLEF union are staging a 24-hour walkout, leaving many trains without drivers. The rail delivery group describes the action as unnecessary, but the union says the government is refusing to make a reasonable pay offer. And passengers will face continued disruption tomorrow as the RMT union will walk out over pay and conditions. The dispute, which started over a year ago, remains at a deadlock. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Mark.
Thanks, Lisa. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Mohammed Al Fayed, the former Harrods owner also of Fulham FC, father of Dodi Fayed, killed in a tragic car crash with Princess Diana, has died almost to the day 26 years ago that his son was killed in that car crash. I knew Mohammed Al-Fayed and his son. They were both absolute gentlemen, and it's a very sad occasion on his passing. So we'll get reaction from former BBC presenter Sue Cook. That's coming up very shortly. Plus, we'll be asking, will you get boosted to save the NHS? That's the subject of an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll, the results of which are on their way. Plus, tomorrow's papers with live reaction in the studio from my top pundits. Emma Wolfe, David Oldroyd Bolt and Mike Porky Parry. # Dream Team. Plus, my brilliant pundits will be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros of the day. A packed hour, and those papers are coming. But first, my take at 10. What takes 5 hours? Painting a front room? Running a marathon slowly? Having tantric sex with Sting? Well, I didn't do anything nearly as enjoyable this week. Instead, I watched Prince Harry's latest TV offering, which, like a stale packet of custard creams, is subject to the law of diminishing returns. Straight out of the traps, this new series, which is supposed to be about war heroes, Harry made about himself, banging on about his trauma. Like the trauma I experienced watching the world's least happy millionaire once again moan about his lot in the context of real heroes featured in the show who have lost limbs and livelihoods. Yes, Prince Harry's worldwide privacy tour continues with a new Netflix documentary series called Heart of Invictus. Now, the tales of heroism are legion in this powerful documentary, and watching people overcome the most devastating mental and physical injuries to rebuild their lives and to participate in competitive sport is truly moving and truly inspiring. But just as the thrill of a visit to the Playboy mansion would have been tempered by the sight of an ageing Hugh Hefner, so the presence of whinging Prince Harry in this new show is the ultimate turn-off. This documentary is important, as are the Invictus Games, but in both cases tainted by the face of the outfit, a man who's turned self-pity into a sporting tournament all of its own. Let's not forget the Invictus Games was an idea nicked off the Americans, the so-called Warrior Games. And the project was reportedly, in part at least, the brainchild of palace insiders, seeking to rehabilitate the image of this errant young royal after his relentless partying and questionable choice of fancy dress. You have to worry when people liked you more when you regularly dressed up as Adolf Hitler. Now, whilst I've got no doubt that Harry's very engaged with the stories told in this series, and he deserves huge credit for founding the event, but I wonder how many of these brave ex-soldiers wish to be represented by a man who, during his time in Afghanistan, was known as Bunker Harry, as the authorities wrapped him in cotton wool. He spent just 10 weeks in Afghanistan on that first tour. I've had longer trips to Tenerife and gained more scars, let me tell you. Fair play to Harry for having served in action abroad, but his military CV, which is shorter than Tom Cruise's 501s, hardly makes him Horatio Nelson. It will stick in the craw for many war heroes that the face of the Invictus Games is a man who has spent the last few years vilifying the institutions for which they have fought: the monarchy, the country and the royal family. Harry's intermittent relationship with the truth resurfaced in this documentary as well, with him once again seizing the opportunity to attack the British media, saying the press have not done enough to cover the plight of wounded British troops. But like a faulty sniper, his comments have backfired badly, with SAS hero Andy McNabb, no less, saying to claim media outlets weren't fighting for our injured servicemen is offensive and rubbish. Ouch. Bit of friendly fire there. Harry also takes a sideswipe at his own family, saying his mental health was neglected over the years. But this is the same prince who has previously written how his brother, Prince William, forced him to get therapy. I'm so confused. So there you have it. Now, Prince Harry will be attending the Invictus Games in Germany this September, where it's expected he'll be joined by his wife to meet the troops. Blimey. They've faced ISIS and the Taliban. Now they've got to deal with Meghan Markle. Have they not suffered enough? I'll be honest, I feel I deserve a medal for sitting through 5 hours of this boring, self-satisfied rubbish. Next time, let the soldiers be the star of the show. What do you think, Mark at GBnews.com? Am I being too hard on Harry? I know lots of people think that the Invictus Games are a great credit to him. He founded those games. He's represented the plight of injured servicemen. Many would argue that's one of the really good things about Prince Harry. So am I being too harsh? Let me know your thoughts. Mark at GBnews.com. I'll get to your emails shortly, but first let's hear from tonight's top pundits. Ringside for all of the action. Don't forget the papers on their way. TV and radio broadcaster Mike Porky Parry, co-founder of TalkSport, former head honcho at The Express, you name it, a CV longer than your arm. Also, top author and journalist, busiest woman in showbiz, Emma Wolf, and a man with the brain the size of Jupiter, but much more handsome, historian and writer David Oldroyd-Bolt. David, your thoughts on this documentary series from Prince Harry? Am I being too hard on him?
Not necessarily, because I think you are too hard about his war record. I think the Duke of Sussex went to serve for as long as he was allowed to serve. I think what will stick in the craw of his brother officers and the men who were under his command is that he does seem to have this appalling tendency to make it all about himself, which is totally contrary to the best traditions of the British Army, and particularly contrary to the best traditions of the officer class. The first thing that you are taught at Sandhurst is that the men matter, not you. You lead from the front, you never ask them to do anything you wouldn't do, and they matter more than you do. And this is the really difficult thing, I think, that a lot of us struggle with about Prince Harry. We have residual affection for him, and we still remember that brave man, and I think he was a brave man, who went into combat, who looked after his brother officers, who looked after the men under his command, but has now become utterly self-centred. He's become, I'm afraid to say, Californiaised. And I think we all of us feel, can you not just come back to us and become a bit more of a Briton rather than being an American who always thinks it's about you, not the people you seek to represent and serve?
Indeed. So, Emma Wolf, I don't know if you've had a chance to watch this documentary.
No, I haven't. Based on what you've said, Mark, I'd love to see it, but with all the Harry bits edited out, because I think the stories of some of these men who, you know, did lose limbs and suffer appalling injuries fighting for, as you say, fighting for Queen and country, the same Queen and country that Harry has turned against and has fled from and then keeps coming back to sort of poke like a, you know, hornet's nest. So I think I agree with everything David says about Harry. I don't think one can ever be too hard on Prince Harry. Mark, you're certainly not. It's embarrassing, and it's always about him.
However, many would argue, Mike Parry, that the Invictus Games is one of the few good news stories around the brand of Prince Harry.
Well, it is, but as my two colleagues here have already indicated to you, he's trying to make it about himself and not about them. I have started feeling for a while now pretty sorry for Prince Harry. I think he's a man who's lost. I think he's wandering the world, literally wandering the world, trying to find a purpose in life. What about his recent trip to Japan? He didn't go with his wife. Now, if they wanted to project themselves as, you know, a world couple, you know, a royalty in waiting, surely they'd have gone together, wouldn't they? Because he was greeted very warmly in Japan. He even made a comment at one stage saying, I could come and live here, because that's how they greeted him so nicely. But to me, Harry looks like a bloke who somebody suddenly picked up a cast iron pan and smacked it on the back of his head like that about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and he still looks dazed to me. His eyes still look as though they're spinning around. I don't think he knows his purpose in life. I think he's very unsure now about who's with him and who's not, because the royal family, once the king took over, got very much harder in their denunciation of his actions than had happened when the late Queen was alive. And his wife seems to have a sort of dilettante attitude as to whether she wants to be with him or not anymore. So I'm starting to feel sorry with Harry, and I'll make a very bold prediction on your show here. I think it's going to end badly.
How long do you give it, Mike?
Well, I would say within about the next 18 months, I think he's going to start waking up in the morning in California, in the hot sunshine, and wonder, A, what have I done? B, what have I got left? C, is there any way back?
There you go. Well, listen, you heard it here first, as Mike Porky Parry said. Do you think that Prince Harry has made the Invictus Games all about him? Let me know, mark@gbnews.com. Coming up, reaction to the passing of Egyptian-born businessman Mohammed Al Fayed, former owner of Harrods, father of Dodi Fayed, killed in a car crash with Princess Diana. Plus, will you get boosted to save the NHS? I'll be asking tonight's Newsmaker, TV legend Sue Cook. Plus, tomorrow's front page... teeth back in. Tomorrow's papers with full Pundit reaction. There you go. Getting used to this gig again. See you in 3.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I can't lie, not too much support for Prince Harry out there, but I'll get to your emails on that at 10:30 just before the papers. But it's time now for the Newsmaker, in which we speak to a fearless commentator on the big stories of the day. And tonight, former Harrods and Fulham FC owner Mohammed Al Fayed has died at the age of 94. The Egyptian-born businessman's passing comes almost 26 years to the day after his own son Dodi was killed alongside Princess Diana in a car crash in Paris. Let's get immediate reaction now from tonight's Newsmaker, TV legend Sue Cook. Sue, this is a guy who was intrinsically linked to the tragedy of Diana's death. People forgot and people glossed over the fact that he too lost his own son.
Yes, they did, didn't they, really? To
to be honest, I thought he might have died already because he's hasn't been heard of much for the last 15 years or so, has he?
No.
I can't think that many people are going to grieve his loss greatly. I mean, he went to his grave convinced that there was foul play in Dodie and Diana's death, and who knows, we'll never know entirely, but he didn't, I think, endear himself to many people towards the end. And so 94, he made a good innings, didn't he? But,
well, he did. I mean, he was Sue, he was a maverick figure, wasn't he? Wasn't just the father of Dodie, who was dating Diana, the most famous woman in the world, but he was a billionaire owner of Harrods. He tried and failed to get a passport from the Home Office. He bought Fulham FC. He even started a radio station called 963 Liberty, which was my first ever gig, which is why I know the guy and have basically worked for him, one of my first bosses. So he was certainly a colourful character.
The very word I was going to say, and you took it from my mouth. Colourful, yes. Yes, he was a colourful character. Complicated, colourful. Some people say he has a rather interesting relationship with the truth. Who knows? Certainly he made his mark in a big way, didn't he, in the 80s and 90s. And I'll never forget that memorial to Dodie and Diana's death in Harrods. Do you remember? There was this massive sort of iconic memorial in the middle of the store, which some people thought was rather tasteless.
Indeed, so it wasn't for everyone. Well, there you go. R.I.P. Mohammed Al-Fayed. Now, Sue, health experts have called for COVID booster eligibility to be widened amid fears the new pyrola variant could trigger a wave of infections. Some pharmacies have already run out of COVID tests as experts urge Brits to stay alert to the new strain. Some scientists have recommended a return of pandemic mitigation measures, mask wearing, ventilation. Dr. Tricia Greenhalgh, based at the University of Oxford, Sue, suggested everyone should be made eligible for a jab. She said it's a good idea to vaccinate everyone. So will you be getting boosted to save the NHS?
I personally won't, no. I had the first two and I didn't have a very good reaction to either of them, and I won't be having any more. I just think we've all had enough of this scaremongering, but some people are still genuinely frightened and concerned about it all, and I think if they want to have a jab, then that's fine. But I don't think there should be any more coercion, any more talks of mandates or forcing people to have jabs, no more emotional blackmail. A lot of people had jabs just because they, like I did, really. I didn't really want to have it, but I felt I should because the whole, we were being blackmailed almost emotionally. And, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. Everybody should have their own opinion and make their own decisions for themselves and should not be criticised for whatever decision they make. I could never understand why one was criticised so much if you didn't want to have a vaccination, because if you've had your vaccination, why would you worry about catching it from somebody else because if you've been vaccinated? So I don't know why people got quite so angry with people who didn't have the jab.
Yes, there wasn't the first aspect of the pandemic that didn't really add up. Let me be clear that the government is certain and mainstream medical opinion is that the vaccine has saved millions of lives. I've always said if you're in a vulnerable group, if you risk hospitalisation or death from the virus, you'd be mad not to have it. But I agree with you, Sue, that we can't be bullying others into taking a medication that they wish not to, particularly if they don't face a mortal threat from the virus. With you, I agree on that. Do you think that the public would swallow any COVID measures this winter? Do you think the public would accept mask mandates or social distancing this time round, Sue?
Some will. I've just come back, like you, I've just come back from holiday, got caught up in the air traffic control thing, which was very fun. But there were some people on the plane wearing masks, and you think, well, okay, it seems totally daft, but if people want to wear masks, if people feel happy, they should do what they want to do. But to be honest, I think most people have had enough. I think we've absolutely got scare fatigue now. What worries me slightly is that we've been scared so many times over so many variants and so many things. One day there'll be a really worrying variant, and we'll all go, oh yes, the crying wolf again. Oh yeah, another virus. Yeah, forget it, virus schmirus. And maybe one day, we should be scared, but I think we've all had enough, really.
Sue, great to have you back on the show. Can't wait for our next on-air encounter. TV legend, former star of the BBC, Crime Watch, Children in Need and so many other hits, the wonderful Sue Cook. Now, tomorrow's front pages are on their way and we've got some cracking headlines and reaction to the death of Mohammed Al-Fayed. But first, here's your weather.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Showers clearing overnight, some low cloud remaining, even some fog by dawn, but the trend is for it to turn increasingly sunny and increasingly warm over the next few days as high pressure replaces low pressure. Low pressure already filling and disappearing overnight, and as a result, the showers and any outbreaks of rain tending to become very isolated through the hours of darkness. A lot of low cloud, I think, especially for England and Wales, and some fog patches forming by dawn. But the clearest skies will be across northern Scotland. Here, temperatures dipping close to freezing in some of the most sheltered spots, single figures widely. Further south, it's a mild night, and again, there'll be some low cloud and mist as we start things off. But that will, through the morning, lift and it will break up. Eventually, we'll see some sunny spells break through. I think still some cloud remaining, still some showers across England and Wales, but not as many as recent days. There'll be plenty of fine weather on offer and it will feel warmer. 26 Celsius there, the high in the southeast, low 20s widely elsewhere. And into Sunday, again, a bit of a slow start, some mist and fog first thing, especially for southern parts of the UK. Breezier further north with some outbreaks of rain for the north and northwest of Scotland. That tends to ease later in the day as sunshine develops widely across the country in time for the start of next week. And as that happens, temperatures rise.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Coming up, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and the news that Mohammed Al-Fayed, the father of Dodi Fayed, who was killed in a car crash with Princess Diana, has himself died in his 90s. Former Harrods owner, Fulham FC as well. We'll react to that with Mike Parry, one of my pundits who knows Fayed well and who broke the story of Diana's car crash all those years ago. Plus, we've got other front pages hot off the press from all of our pundits. And in an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll, we've been asking, will you get boosted to save the NHS this winter? The results are in, and I will reveal all next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Is Prince Harry making the Invictus Games all about himself? That's the topic of tonight's Take at 10, which I'm delighted to say Connor has crafted into a video which you can catch up on via Twitter, or X as it's called, at GB News. Hi, Mark. Absolutely right. Harry is becoming a laughingstock and an embarrassment. His wife must be getting fed up with the embarrassment. Or is she that deluded? But Barbara says, Mark, such venom, sarcasm, constant criticism of Harry and Meghan are becoming tasteless. It goes on. Christine, what I would like to know is how much money will Harry be donating to Help for Heroes, all those charities that support our servicemen and women. Christine, thank you for that. Keep those emails coming. Mark at gbnews.uk. Just a lovely email from Viv who says, Mark, you were so missed. You're number one for me. Well, Viv, thank you for that. It's a great, great delight to be back. Missed you hugely. And now let's bring you the results of our final poll of the evening. I've been asking, will you get boosted to save the NHS this winter? The results are in. 81.8% say no, they won't get boosted, whilst 18.2% say they will get the jab. I think that's such a big story that with producer Greg's permission, I think we're going to discuss that in the next few minutes, because I want reaction from my pundits in terms of what those COVID policies have done to vaccine hesitancy in this country. OK, it's time for this. We start with the Independent newspaper. How many more of our classrooms could collapse? The Daily Telegraph. Braverman, woke police damaging public trust. Home Secretary launches an investigation into officers pandering to politically correct causes. Also, trolls will not force me to cover up, says Amanda Holden. Crumbling concrete crisis spreads to hospitals. The Times. When will this school crisis end? Ask parents. The Daily Mail. Hundreds more schools at risk. Ministers admit concrete crisis likely to grow. Fury as pupils' education thrown into chaos again. Hospitals, courts and homes are also affected. The Eye Weekend. Hundreds more schools await safety checks despite collapse risk warning to ministers in 2019. The Sun, Saudi £200 million Mo grab. The Saudis are plotting a world record bid of up to £200 million to wrestle Mo Salah away from the Premier League and Liverpool Football Club. Daily Mirror, and they get the story out there in time. Al Fayed dies at 94. Mohammed Al Fayed pictured there with Diana in 1998. Of course, the year after she was killed. Government of failure, what a mess. Thousands of children now told they can't go back to school because buildings are falling down. Can't the Tories get anything right? Ask the Mirror. Those are your front pages. Let's get reaction now from my top pundits tonight. Author and journalist Emma Wolfe, historian and writer David Oldroyd-Bolt, and TV and radio legend Mike Porky Parry. And let's have a look at this developing story. You'll have heard Lisa mention this in the bulletin earlier, Mike Parry. Mohammed Al Fayed has passed away at the age of 94.
Yeah.
A significant figure in business, former owner of Fulham FC, but perhaps most known, really, as the father of Dodi Fayed,
Absolutely.
killed in a car crash in Paris with Diana. Now, you're very close to this story.
Well, I broke the story to the world 17 minutes before the official announcement came out of the Elysee Palace, and it was the most nervous 17 minutes of my life.
Because it was a gamble, wasn't it, really?
Well, it wasn't a gamble. I had a correspondent with the Foreign Secretary, Robin Cook, in Manila, OK? And he had been informed even before the Prime Minister, because it happened on foreign territory, and he was the Foreign Secretary. So he was the first member of the UK government to be informed that Diana had, in fact, died. And luckily, I had a man there, and he actually went up to Robin Cook and said, "Has Diana died? All the signs coming out of Paris." He said, "I'm afraid I have to tell you she has." And so he came back to me. You can only rely on the reputation and the strength of your correspondence. I had to either say, we've got to go with it because the world needs to know this has happened, or I could have sat on it. I believed in the man who told me, Charlie Miller, the defence and diplomatic correspondent. We went with it. And can you imagine that news when Mohammed Al Fayed, who had huge ambitions to become father-in-law to Diana, Princess of Wales, suddenly realised not only has his son gone, but the woman who he hoped would be his daughter-in-law had gone as well. It must have been enormous.
Correct. And he speculated, Emma, about the circumstances of that crash, and he implied and alleged at various intervals that this was planned.
Yeah, he did, and was, you know, vilified by many in the British establishment for that. It's sort of end of an era, isn't it? I mean, just hearing Mike talk about that time and thinking back to Diana's death and all of that, it brings it all back quite vividly. And also listening to you guys talking about, you know, his acquisition of Harrods and then Fulham Football Club and his real aspirations to be a figure in the British establishment.
And could never get a passport, could he?
No,
could never
was
get
never
a UK
acceptable,
Why was he
really.
refused a passport by Jack Straw at the time? Do we know?
Well, because they always feared that in the background somewhere other information would come out, because nobody could ever discover where Mohammed Al Fayed got his original money from to buy all these jewels like Harrods, you know, like Fulham Football Club. Nobody knew where the source of his money. And he was an immensely rich man. Never mind Harrods. I think he had something like £30 million worth of apartments in Park Lane in the days when they only cost £1 million each, you know what I mean?
David.
Well, not only did he have that, he also bought and renovated the house that the Duke and Duchess of Windsor lived in the Bois de Boulogne in Paris.
Yeah.
And has turned it into a museum, which is supposed to be opening soon. He owned the Ritz in Paris.
Yes.
He bought Termal and Nasser, the Prince of Wales's shirt maker, in order to get himself that bit closer. And can we just say, it was not Al Fayed. That was a total fraud on his part. It was Mohammed Fayed. He decided to add the Al to make himself sound grander.
No, what's wrong with that?
Well,
you know,
it's fraud. I mean, he was an extraordinary man, but I think also an extraordinarily bitter man. The years and years and years when he alleged, as you said, that there was the royal family playing a part in the death of...
Well, didn't he
Diana,
allege
Princess
that
of
Prince
Wales?
Philip killed his son?
Well, yes, he said it was a conspiracy between the late Duke of Edinburgh and the security service, which is just risible.
Yeah.
And he was clearly, if you lose your son and heir, you will be a deeply unhappy man. But I think it passed over from the realms of the normal grief and unhappiness to a serious...
Oh, he became deranged.
Yes, exactly.
He became deranged about it. He reckoned the Duke of Edinburgh's plan was to make sure that nobody except somebody with pure white skin would ever become a member of the royal family, and therefore his son was threatening the lineage of the royal family. He was convinced of it.
Yeah, so I worked for him because part of his plan to become a respectable figure of the establishment was to be the owner of a football club, and that was Fulham, and to be a media proprietor. So he set up 963 Liberty, a medium wave radio station based in London, actually run by Mike Hollingsworth, formerly of TVAM, very, very talented TV producer. And Al Fayed was very focused about Mr. Fayed, very focused about what he wanted, a clear vision, pretty ruthless as well. Stories were legion at Harrods about how people would find out if they'd been fired, and very often it was the fact that their phone wouldn't work in the office. And they'd go off to HR and say, why doesn't my phone doesn't work, I can't get any calls through. And they go, oh yeah, we need to talk to you about that, you're being let go. There is another story in which he went walkabout in Harrods very regularly. He was the chairman and he was like the emperor of that place. And he'd go around to various departments, making sure everyone was on their game. And in the menswear department, he caught a young retail professional swinging the lead, not being very busy. So he said, young man, Go and do something. Be useful. You know, fold some jumpers. Don't just stand there. So the person goes, yeah, apologies, Mr. Chairman, of course. And he gets busy, right? No problem. So then Al Fayed walks off, but then he does a little swing round and goes back to the menswear department unexpectedly. And the young worker is again being lazy. And that was the last we saw of him.
I should think you would. I went to Fulham, his football club, one night when Everton were playing there, my club, OK, and the club had just been sold. He'd just sold the club, he'd got out of it. And I saw all these arc lights as I was leaving the stadium quite late on, because I'd been in the boardroom having plenty of this after the game. And do you know what it was? It was a crane had been moved in to remove the Michael Jackson statue, which he had erected at Fulham Football Club.
Because he was close to Michael Jackson.
He was very close to Michael
Jackson. Let's have a look at what Fulham Football Club have had to say. Everyone at Fulham was incredibly saddened to learn of the death of our former owner and chairman, Mohammed Al Fayed. We owe Mohammed a debt of gratitude for what he did for our club, and our thoughts are now with his family and friends at this sombre time. Was his input in Fulham, was his purchase of Fulham significant for Fulham's history?
It was very significant, but of course, when he first bought it, and think of the site of Fulham Football Club, right on the banks of the River Thames, prime, you know, West London territory, everybody was convinced that he'd only bought it to knock it down and build multi-million-pound flats on it. And yet, after he bought it, and he suddenly found that being the chairman of a Premier League football club actually makes you quite important, and you mix with the great and the good, and Bobby Charlton, where is Bobby Charlton? You know, and all this kind of stuff. He suddenly decided he quite liked football. So he did the stadium up and kind of rebuilt it. Michael Cole, of course, our old friend, worked for him for many years, didn't he, as his
spokesman?
As his spokesman and information specialist. And in fact, I went to Fulham with Michael Cole and was in the director's box with Mr. Al Fayed. One of Mr. Al Fayed's sons was disabled, or is disabled,
right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And he was so caring about this boy to make sure that everybody made sure the lad, you know, had his lunch properly and everything. I remember that distinctly. And he was a gigantic presence there, you know. When you were his guest, you were like royalty as well, you know what I mean? He was... I had a lot of time for him.
Interesting stuff. Let's have a look now at the Daily Telegraph. And Emma Wolfe, Braverman, woke police damaging public trust. Public confidence in the police is being eroded and needlessly damaged because officers are politicised and partisan. According to the Home Secretary, in an interview with the Telegraph, Braverman discloses that she's instructed Andy Cook, His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Constabulary, to investigate the unacceptable rise in police taking a side on controversial issues. This after the new Met chief has said he won't allow his officers to be political. Your reaction to this?
Well, this is all part of... I mean, Rishi Sunak has been popping up a few times during the week saying that, you know, life means life and they're going to get tough on crime. This is all, you know, they know that that's a popular election strategy. Suella Braverman is, you know, in a pretty beleaguered position. She can't do anything about immigration. She can't do anything about stopping the boats and everything. So, yeah, she knows it's popular to say we want police to fight crime and stop tweeting. We don't want any of this nonsense. Police in rainbow gear dancing across, you know, crossings and not arresting Just Stop Oil protesters and all of that kind of thing. So, you know, yeah.
Well, that's right. The new Met Police chief has said that it was wrong for officers to take the knee. Would you agree with that, David?
I think it's very obviously wrong because it's a directly political gesture in support of a Marxist group that seeks the downfall of Western civilization. So the idea that it could be right or indeed acceptable, I think, is for the birds. The interesting thing, I think, here is that the Tories have finally remembered that they are supposed to be the party of law and order. You know, there's an old trope in Tory party associations that in order to win a few extra votes in difficult times, all you have to do as the Tory party is to say that you'll hang paedophiles and fund the NHS up to the gills. And this is probably what they're going to start doing in the run-up to the election, which they are almost bound to lose. But I think it's a very positive sign for the Met particularly, which over the past 2 or 3 years, well, in fact, no, past 3 or 4 years, has been under increasing suspicion of being more of a political arm of the woke state than it has of an actual law enforcement body, never mind the body that is protecting citizens, particularly given the rape crises that it has been engulfed with, particularly given, as we've seen yet again, that every year we have the Notting Hill Carnival and every year people are wounded very, very seriously. People's property is destroyed, and yet we seem to be asked to foot the bill for it. So I wonder if there might start to be something from the new Chief Constable, Chief Inspector of the Met, moving towards the idea that actually the Met needs to serve Londoners, not be there to make political gestures and be popular on Twitter.
Mike, is Suella Braverman on manoeuvres for the Tory leadership?
Well, when people say that, if the Tories are not going to win the next election, who would want to be the leader of the Tory party? You know what I mean? I mean, surely she's young enough to say, OK, Labour, 5 years, they'll probably mess it all up as well. We come back and go on manoeuvres then. But I think the hardest job in politics is being leader of the opposition.
Well, it's certainly the most thankless job.
The most thankless job, absolutely. And not many survive it and come through. Even Neil Kinnock, right, who thought he'd get through his first term with a lot of forgiveness because Mrs Thatcher was so strong, but then failed to win an election in his second term, ended his career, you know. I can't imagine why she would want to be on manoeuvres unless she's so ruthless she thinks she can get rid of Sunak before the next election.
Well, unless you're in the dying years of an unpopular government, as David Cameron was with Gordon Brown, as Mrs Thatcher was with Jim Callaghan, as Tony Blair was from 1994 after the death of John Smith with John Major, there is absolutely no point being leader of the opposition. It is the most deathly job in all politics.
Absolutely.
You can alter nothing, you can change nothing, you can affect nothing, and you always end up carrying the can. This is what happened with William Hague.
I was about to say, William Hague said, oh, you know, opposition is not for the faint-hearted. Well, it just ruined his any aspirations he had of being leader of this country.
Well, indeed,
We're going to have a look at more front pages. I've got the Daily Mail, I've got the Times and the Weekend, all fascinating headlines. Full reaction from my top pundits tonight. Plus, they'll be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros. And what's going on with these crumbling schools? It's the wrong kind of concrete. We know about the wrong snow. Now we've got the wrong concrete. Is Britain broken? We'll discuss that next.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Well, a big reaction to all the topics we've been discussing today. Mark Dolan tonight, People's Poll, has been asking, will you get boosted this winter to save the NHS? Wayne says, no thanks to any more vaccines. I will never have another trial drug from the NHS just so another politician or civil servant can get a top-paid position within the big pharmaceutical industry. Well, Wayne, you're not wrong to point that out. It was Jonathan Van Tam, Professor Jonathan Van Tam, who I think is now partnered with Moderna. What a cosy world they inhabit. Hi, Mark. Booster my arse, says Chris. They do... I'm just going to take my glasses off here. Well, basically, sorry, I can't quite make out the full detail of the email, but Chris is simply refusing to get boosted. And, of course, it is a free country, is it not? Let's get reaction to all the big stories of the day with my top pundits. I'm delighted to have Mike Parry, Emma Wolfe and David Oldroyd-Bolt. And Emma, one of the big stories in town is schools, in fact, across almost every paper. When will this school crisis end, ask parents. Hundreds more schools at risk. Britain is crumbling.
It's unbelievable, and that this comes at the end of a summer, and if you've got kids, you know it's a long, long old summer. The fact that children are due to go back to schools within a couple of days, and that this was apparently known about since 2019, it's just unbelievable. And after the years, the 2-3 years that our young people have had, the damage, the appalling damage that it's done to their education, to their development, to their social lives, to their mental health, to their physical health, this is just, it's astonishing that the Tories or that somebody didn't respond to this properly as they should have when they were first warned about it.
But can you blame the government, David? I mean, this is historic, isn't it? This will be over decades, the wrong kind of concrete.
Yes, but isn't it just yet another nail in the coffin of the idea that Britain is any good at infrastructure projects? It seems like, as you said, Britain is crumbling. We have roads and highways that are in such a state of disrepair that if you live anywhere outside a major city, your car will be destroyed by the potholes. We have schools that are crumbling, our hospitals are crumbling. The basic points of civic architecture and infrastructure are crumbling. For instance, when was the last time that you or any of your viewers walked along a high street and saw a clock on a public building that was actually showing the correct time? It's as though we have given up on the idea that the civic fabric of our nation is actually worth maintaining to a decent degree. It is as though we have forgotten how to build things that last. You know, we look around us at our cathedrals, at our ancient cities, at our ancient schools, at our ancient monuments. They were built to last, and they do last. You can walk around any cathedral city in the country and you see architecture of 800, 900, 1,000 years old, and yet anything, it seems, that was built within the past 30 or 40 years has a half-life of, well, now. We are seeing the crumble before us. And it makes me think, are we no longer serious about building a country that lasts? And why is that? What is so wrong with our national psyche that we cannot put the money and the time and the effort in to building a nation for the future? Why are we taking, if it proves to be, which it looks to be from the reports we read today, a case of cutting costs or cutting corners in order to cut costs, why are we so little invested in our future that we make those poor decisions and yet can spend enormous amounts of money on things that simply do not matter?
David Oldroyd-Bolt for Prime Minister. Now, let's kick off with your headline heroes and back page zeros of the day. So who's your headline hero today,
OK, so
Emma?
my hero, I don't like her, but Nadine Dorries, because there are very few heroes around, for putting the fun back, for putting the farce back into politics. The idea that Nadine Dorries has conducted an in-depth investigation into the darker forces, the corruption at the heart of our democracy, has been the best thing about this long, hot summer of 2023. I think her resignation letter was the highlight of this summer that I will gladly forget, frankly, and bring on her book, which, oh, whoops, is being delayed until November.
Another great work of fiction beckons. David, your headline hero.
I'm going to go for the Royal Australian Mint, because they have decided to issue a $5 commemorative coin on September the 7th, the anniversary of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II's death. I think this is a really excellent thing in the life of our great nation, because, as we mustn't forget, the King now is head not only of our state, but that of Canada and of Australia and of 14 other nations around the world. And I think, given that Australia has such a touchy relationship with monarchy, I think it's a very good sign for the future of the King as King of Australia, as well as of Great Britain, that they are doing this.
What an excellent shout. Mike, just a few seconds for your headline hero.
It's got to be Susan Hall. She's going to take on Sadiq Khan in the mayoral election next May, and she can win it. And if the Tories have got any hope at all of changing their fortunes around, they've got to get behind her, because if she smashes Sadiq Khan, and she can, the Tories can, that could reverberate all around the country.
OK, just time for a name and a reason. You're back page 0.
Ramaswamy, Vivek Ramaswamy. Last week he was my hero, now he's my zero.
He wants to be US president.
Flip back and forth on this guy. I can't stand him. He's a lot of what he says makes a lot of sense, but he's so irritating.
It's a love-hate.
It's love-hate.
David, you're back page 0.
Yet again, the British Museum, because every day it's worse and worse and worse. We see that our country's greatest museum has lost more and more and more of the things that we should hold in heritage to ourselves.
Mike, give me 5 seconds.
The Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Birds is supposed to be a charity, not a political movement. Too many charities are now political pressure pots. It must end.
On tomorrow's show, TV personality Kim Woodburn, top author and entrepreneur Mike Green, plus radio icon Diddy David Hamilton. Do join us for Mark Dolan tonight. It's fantastic to be back. Thank you for your amazing emails. Headliners is next. See you tomorrow at 9.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Showers clearing overnight, some low cloud remaining, even some fog by dawn, but the trend is for it to turn increasingly sunny and increasingly warm over the next few days as high pressure replaces low pressure. Low pressure already filling and disappearing overnight, and as a result, the showers and any outbreaks of rain tending to become very isolated through the hours of darkness. A lot of low cloud, I think, especially for England and Wales, and some fog patches forming by dawn. But the clearest skies will be across northern Scotland. Here, temperatures dipping close to freezing in some of the most sheltered spots, single figures widely. Further south, it's a mild night,